And we are live. So today on Lifestyle Medicine, we've got Michelle Lin. So Michelle, I'm going to just give you a little tiny intro and then you can kind of flesh out whatever I miss because you've got a lot that you do. But Michelle was a part of Dr. Yang Jwing-Ming's program, and you were part of the 5-year program, correct?
Yes.
And that was back in 2013 is when that started? Okay. So Michelle was in this program where you were essentially studying Kung Fu full-time for 5 years, and you learned Chinese, you guys learned digital media so that you could actually circulate what you learned after the fact. And my first episode was with Javier Rodriguez, who was also on the mountain, but he was there for 9 years. So I know you have a background, Michelle, in martial arts. You've been doing it for most of your life, and you've got a pretty eclectic background. But can you kind of give a background to, who you are, what you do, so the audience has a better feel for that?
So I started training Kung Fu at YMAA Andover when I was about 15. And my history is a little bit weird because I only did it for about 3 years and then I stopped for 7 and didn't think I was going to come back because it was more of a hobby for me back then. And I also had a knee surgery. So it was pretty sporadic in terms of my training. And in my mid-20s, I came back to it. And actually it was because Jonathan Chang, one of the only 10-year student who stayed on, I heard about him joining the program, which was starting up in 2008. So just hearing about him, reconnecting with him, inspired me to want to train again. And John's from the same school and hometown as me. So that was my background in Kung Fu. And when I got to the retreat center, I started learning Tai Chi. I took a couple weeks of an intro class for Tai Chi before that, but basically nothing. I started fresh. But having that Kung Fu background definitely helped with the foundation for Tai Chi.
Yeah, to say the least. And so it's safe to say then most of your martial art training was actually in the YMAA system. You actually had that, which is that's pretty nice because a lot of people come from so many different systems of martial arts, and then they find the one that they want to really bite into, later in life, but they've had usually a mixed background of lots of different things, and you sort of had the same foundation from the get-go, which is rare. That's very not typical.
Actually, at the time when I started, there were it was me, Enrico, Quentin, and Nathan from France.
Yep.
Who were all in YMA. So that was unusual because in the 10-year program, John and Ricardo were the only ones. But then by the time the 5-year program started, most of us actually were from the YMA background. So that definitely, I think it helped us grasp the material sooner just because we had been exposed to it and we kind of knew we knew a little bit more of what was expected of us.
Yeah, what you were getting into. Well, I got there, I don't know if you remember, but I got there I think 2 days after you guys, the 5-year program had started. And I didn't know that. I knew nothing about, I knew Dr. Yang and his work. For the people listening, Dr. Yang Jwing-Ming is prolific in the martial art world. He's written 40 plus books, right? Give or take. It's a lot. But he started this program and you guys were showing up. And when I came in, I thought you guys had all been there for 5 years by that point because I had heard about the 10-year program. And then I remember, I think 2 days into me doing my stuff with you guys, I was like, so how long have you guys been here? You're like, 2 days. And I remember thinking oh, so I'm starting with you. That's very weird. That's very strange. But it was kind of cool too. I felt like I was entering with you guys, even though I was only going to stay for 2 months and not for 5 years. So when you came in, it should be said, you were the only woman there. You were the only one in the program. So what was that like going in knowing that, and then the real-time experience of that? What was that like, being the only woman there?
I guess I felt like I could relate to guys pretty well. So it wasn't that strange for me. And we were all there for the training, so there wasn't anything kind of unusual in that sense. So everybody was just focused on just trying to learn what we were supposed to learn.
Yeah.
But I mean, outside of training, dynamics wise, I mean, for the most part, everyone was pretty respectful. Of course, there are times when guys might not realize and they start to get into that locker room talk. And,
Sure.
I'm there. And so for me, sometimes I wouldn't really say anything, partly
Yeah.
because it was something I wanted them to learn for themselves and to see how the other guys would also react, because it's not just the responsibility of the female to say something if they want, but they can also choose not to say anything and
Right.
just see how that person develops too. So, but that was very, very rare. I can't even, it might have happened like two times maybe, where there was a comment that was like, maybe that shouldn't have been said, or it
Sure.
wouldn't have been said in a more public setting, I should say.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but it definitely, by the end of the program, everybody was a lot more, everybody matured, everybody survived together. So we just had a lot of respect for each other. And yeah, you just have a connection with these people because you spent so many years with them day in, day out. And because of all that training, you're always close to them. You get to know somebody in a way that you can't if you're just talking to them. When you train with them, when you're working with them physically, you
Hmm.
learn a lot about them that wouldn't have been revealed otherwise.
That's very true. It's a very, for lack of a better term, it's a very intimate sort of connection because you're physically training your bodies and you guys are processing your lives at the same time. I think that was the really interesting part that I saw. I was only there for 2 months and I really enjoyed my time with you guys. I mean, it was a blast, and I felt like I was part of your clan for a short period because I started with you, and we, everyone cooked meals together, and I got to really sit with you guys and hang out and socialize and laugh and do body work and acupuncture, and it was cool. It was fun to be in that mix. But I thought it was really interesting how I was watching you guys, especially once I knew that it was the beginning of the 5-year program, watching you guys start to process the reality of we're going to be here for 5 years and we're going to be here doing this thing, excuse me, and being around each other full time and just being saturated in this environment. And I thought there's a lot of therapy that's going on too, because you guys are just working your bodies day in and day out. And that's the therapy in and of itself, is just training Kung Fu and just doing that consistently. But I thought it was very cool that you guys were just like, we're here, we're doing this, and we're going to jump in full tilt, and it's just going to be what it's going to be. And it seemed like, for the most part, everyone pretty much had that attitude. That it was like, yeah, we just have to kind of do this. But I also know there were, in the 10-year program and in the 5-year program, you guys lost people, which is pretty common. I think it seems like it's more common than people that actually stay the full course. So when people have left the program, in your opinion, what has been sort of the determining, what's the straw that breaks the camel's back? What's the reason people leave? Is it different for everybody, or are there some common threads?
It's definitely different for everybody, and I guess the common thread is probably the expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't help it. We have to have some sort of expectation and goal in mind when we go into something like this. So I think for some people, it could have just been the training itself was too much, or they got injured. Like I got injured plenty of times.
Right. You had knee problems, correct? That was
I have a
your.
lot of issues, yeah,
Yeah.
ankle and hip. So,
Yeah.
so I had to train around that. So yeah, it's the physical training, and then also you touched upon massage, which yeah, when you started with us, I felt like you were part of our group too, and
Yeah.
we thought it's gonna be so weird when Gray leaves. But you kind of introduced massage, at least to our group, and it
Yeah.
actually became more and more practiced throughout the years. There are some people who got more interested in it, so
Oh, cool.
they massage each other later on in the year.
That's cool.
But I'll get back to that.
Yeah.
So
That's very cool.
people deciding to leave. Yeah, so it was for a lot of reasons, and I think the only common thread, like I said, is probably expectations one way or another, whether it was the training, the environment,
Mm-hmm.
or just, or maybe even not fitting in with either the lifestyle or the community. So
Right. Well, it seems pretty reasonable. I mean, it's a pretty sizable commitment for people to take on. I mean, I remember, I mean, I was 32. I was 31 when I got onto the mountain. I had my birthday on the mountain, so I turned 32 while I was out there. And I remember, a number of you people were in their 20s, and I remember just thinking, God, buckling down in my 20s to do something like this would be like, I mean, I was so flighty and I was so into so many things, and to buckle down, I thought, boy, this is reasonable that it's going to be hard. Even if you're not in your 20s, I figured it was going to be difficult to commit to that. And that sort of brings me to my my next question. When I've told people about your program, and when I've told them about my experience just living with you guys for 2 months during 2013, when I've shared that, people invariably, they always want to hear the story. They're like, whoa, like, flesh this out. You were living with people that were going to live on a mountain for 5 years or 10 years and do all kinds of crazy things, martial arts related. They grew their own food. They were very intrigued, basically, by the lifestyle. And I remember saying to them, I was like, yeah, it's amazing. And it's also not all shits and giggles. Like, they're doing hard work up there. Like, they're very busy, and they're very diligent, and they're very practiced, and it's long hours. And, I would say that rhythm and that lifestyle is definitely not typical nowadays. We're in the information era. Everyone's on their phones. Everything is very busy. Attention spans are very short. So, when you signed up to go into this program and you got accepted, did those things cross your mind about how different a rhythm this was going to be in terms of lifestyle? Or was it sort of a natural offshoot for you? Were you sort of like, yeah, I can do this? Or it seems so foreign nowadays. I think it's beautiful, but I'm just curious if the foreignness of that was on your plate ahead of time.
I was looking for something different, actually,
Mm-hmm.
and being able to focus on training was what I was searching for. But as you mentioned, it is very different from what we consider normal society. So it wasn't that easy to spend efforts on training. I mean, for many of the hours, of course, we did, but there are other things that came up that were unexpected. So, for example, like growing our own food, right? When you first visited, the garden was relatively small, and it's pretty much double or even tripled in size since then.
Wow.
And so when something expands that much, then you need more manpower to manage it. So There's that balance of, we want to grow our own food, we want it to be organic, but at the same time, how much effort is going into that versus training, and then just balancing all the other chores as well, and just the fluctuation of the number of students or visitors coming in, that would definitely change the rhythm and the number of responsibilities we had outside of training, which made it really challenging because in a way it was a distraction. So it was a constant adjustment because, like we had touched upon, there are a lot of people who left throughout the years, and then people came in, and with that the community dynamic changes. So it was never really the same throughout the 5 years I was there.
Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's all those things. I thought those are all reasonable hurdles that seemed like they would come up, right? The size of the garden growing, the influx of people, and even in the summers, I remember learning that you guys have technically summers off, quote unquote, but in reality, you didn't really have summers off because you were still teaching seminars to students coming in. You're pretty much active, right, during the summer? I mean, you have like a lot of seminars and whatnot.
It depends. So some of the students would stay at the retreat center to help out for Dr. Young's seminars. So they were busy the entire time. They're the ones behind the scenes trying to make sure food's ready, everything's clean, picking up guests, dropping them off, taking them, to the redwoods, and helping to teach the class. So I did only for 1 week, actually. I volunteered like 2 summers ago, so I had a taste of what it was like, but some of the guys stayed there for the entire summer. For other students, though, the ones that went home, so it depended on the student. For me, I went back to my part-time job, and then I would also teach workshops with John here on the East Coast. So we would visit the other YMAA schools here, like Boston, Andover, Portsmouth, and Quebec. So we did want to keep that going, and also to, just to connect with our YMAA family and update our training, and just stay involved, because we were planning to come back to Massachusetts afterwards anyway. So we wanted to have a good network here.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you, like I said, when I've talked to people about this program and I've shared the story, people have asked for sure, and I've wondered the same thing, and I always wish I would have probed a little more, but I also realized how new it was for you guys at the same time. But there had to be sort of a roller coaster, I would think, of emotions, of highs and lows. Like, some days are great, some days you're probably just like, oh, I'm tired, and this is a struggle, like regular life. We have our ups days and down days. Was there, in terms of like the hardest time during the 5 years, was there a time that was the hardest collectively in training, whether it be physical, injury, or just influx of people? Was there a hardest time, or did it come and go?
It definitely came and went, and for me, injuries actually played a pretty big part, and I'm still dealing with some chronic injuries now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of frustration when you train the way you want to train, especially because we're given a number of drills or sequences or exercises that we're supposed to be doing. So there's that side of the training, but we also didn't really have that much knowledge on the yin side of training, on the recovery process. So,
Yeah.
If you think about professional athletes, they have a team that's behind them, telling them what to train, what to eat,
Yeah, absolutely.
when to sleep. And we didn't have that unless we kind of studied on our own.
Right.
But none of us were really, we never actually studied that in depth. So it's difficult to say. Everybody had their own way of dealing with injuries, recovery, but that part was a big hurdle, was just learning how to move and recover efficiently. But yeah, frustration wise and mentally, emotionally, there was a lot of ups and downs as well.
Yeah.
I would say more extreme out there than I'd ever experienced in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because of that environment, and maybe part of it is becoming more sensitive to one's emotions and energies and the ones around you too, and being with them 24/7 almost. So you become very in tune with your own emotions, but in some ways it seems like it's more heightened because of that. So
Yeah.
I'm going around in circles, but it's not always that easy to explain.
No, I think it's well said the way you just said it, because I think that's sort of the key. That's the key point that, I mean, in the context of the work I do, I teach feng shui, I work with people. The environment does make a difference. And I think you guys weren't isolated and cut off from society, but you're also on 240 acres on a mountain, pretty much contained to yourselves, training ancient arts, doing lots of hard physical work, and you are contained in this little bubble. Excuse me. So it follows suit that, yeah, the stuff that you're going to go through is going to be pretty concentrated within that network of people. You guys are going to be going through your stuff, pretty consistently. So, I mean, I always admired you guys for jumping into that process and just being like, yeah, we're here. It's just going to be what it's going to be, and we're here for the training, right? We're going to learn and, absorb what we can from Dr. Yang. Well, and that brings me, as you were saying that, it got me thinking, flashing back to that time. The traditions that I've studied and where I kind of came from was definitely, I spent 5 years in an organization called the North American Tong Shidao Association, and they were a traditional Chinese martial art Kung Fu association, but that also had a very strong medicine lineage tradition. So, of which you guys were recipients of, the Twina that I did with you guys during the time. So I was working on people, and people listening, I was offering up to work on you guys for free, because I was like, you guys need it. You guys are in dire need of, because you're going to be going through a lot physically. And when I was in Tong Shidao, that was a pretty amazing idea. Their whole take, sort of, at least from the traditional Chinese martial art context, was it's like the medicine and martial arts really went hand in hand. And when you practice martial arts, you get dinged up quite a bit. And so if you have the yin portion or the medicine portion, it's a favor. It behooves you to yourself to do that and to take care of yourself. So it's interesting when you said, when I was doing Twina with you guys, I know you guys were happy to receive it. You're like, oh yeah, like totally, like work on my legs, work on my back, my hips, whatever. But then you said it also actually stuck around, like people actually got into it. I know Javier had interest in it, and I know he was giving Twina massage to Dr. Yang like weekly, right? And I think he did that for like his duration of time there. But can you talk about that a little bit, like how that Twina massage piece kind of came in, and it sounds like it stayed, but I would love to hear more about that.
Well, I can tell you that it wasn't every student,
Sure.
but definitely Javi and Quentin and Piper actually took an interest in that as well. So that eventually they started to practice on Dr. Young, and whenever we had visitors who came and had experience with massage, they would pick up some tips from them. So we were happy to be recipients of their practice. So
Your connection cut out there, Michelle, just for a second. So you said when the visitors came, you what with them? Like you got tips from them? Is that what?
Yeah, so there were plenty of visitors who came, and they had some experience in different types of massage. So those guys would learn a few tips from them and then try it out as well. So
Oh,
a lot
cool.
of it was pretty organic for them, and I think they took an interest. They started researching on their own, either reading books or watching some YouTube videos to pick up other tips as well, because I remember I had specific areas that I need to be worked on. So Quentin would look it up on YouTube and then try it on me next time. So I was happy for that. But yeah, I mean, that didn't really pick up until a little bit later, because when you had started with us, we still had our schedule was pretty much set a certain way for a few years, but then we started to make more adjustments throughout the years to allow more time for recovery and massage with that.
Yeah, I remember that because I actually remember giving Dr. Yang that proposal and saying, like, I'd be so happy to come out and work. I was going to bring a team out to you guys and be like, I'm going to work on you guys and get that going. But I also remember him being like, I really appreciate the offer, but with a new group and this new flow, like, we have to really just stay on schedule. We really just have to stay. He's like, it's tight as it is. And to incorporate something, even if it's like beneficial for them, he's like, we can't juggle it. And I was bummed, but I also understood where he was coming from. Especially like a year later, I was like, I just staying and watching you guys and seeing what was going on. And I stayed really connected with Javier. I talked with him consistently, and he's come out and visited me. And I just started to see how busy you guys actually were. So that it made sense in that bigger picture. And what was your experience? When people were doing the Twina or massage or whatever it is that they're doing. What did you notice a difference, like in terms of, did it help as you guys got body work? Did you feel it was beneficial in the process?
I mean, it depended on what the issues were, but for sure, I could say overall, I felt a lot better usually after a massage. But there's some issues that require more than that. So you still definitely have to see a medical professional to find out exactly what your condition is.
Sure.
But on the whole, I think it was definitely really helpful. And eventually I started to use the sauna towards the end of the year.
Cool.
I didn't really have a thing for saunas until my last semester. But I felt the benefits of it, so I appreciated that. So
what turned you on to saunas? I mean, I know you guys had one there. I'm a huge advocate for sauna, but was there a turning point? Was there research you read, videos you watched that got you thinking about sauna and the benefits?
Actually, one of the 3-year students who came on later on, he's a retired doctor, and after doing some treatments on me and telling me about it, I was like, okay, I should probably give it another shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's all it really took.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Someone saying something at the right time, and you're like, yeah, okay, that sounds pretty decent, for sure. One little side question I had, just because you mentioned his name, was Piper. Piper was, he wasn't technically part of the program. He was a visitor who became a 5-year student, basically. He stayed the whole 5 years?
Yeah, I think it was probably like the end of year 2 where he's like, I decided I'd like to stay for the 5 years.
That's hilarious.
So he was about 18 at the
18.
time, I think, or he was quite young. So
Totally, yeah.
he's trying to figure out what he wants in life and what experiences he's looking for. So we were happy to train with him from day one, and he was always part of our group as far as we were concerned, whether he was a visitor or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was the funniest thing, because when I got there, I remember he was young, like right out of high school, and I remember, and Quentin was really young. Quentin was like 15 or 16. I don't know how old he was, but he was young as well. And I remember meeting Piper though, and I was like, oh, so you're one of the students? He's like, no. He's like, I just don't know what to do, and this sounded really cool, so I'm going to do this. And then I remember I loved Piper. Piper was funny, and he was, charismatic, and I remember just staying there. And then I remember talking to Javi like a year later, and I'm like, whatever happened to Piper? He's like, oh, he's there. And then like 2 years later, I remember talking to Javi and saying, is Piper still there? He's like, oh yeah, he's now he's part of the 5-year like group. And I'm like, that's crazy. He just stayed there and did his thing. It's so cool. So that's just kind of funny. So Piper, if you're listening, hello. But yeah, that's pretty cool that he stayed the course and did that whole bit. So Michelle, after you do your 5 years, you go through the program, you do all this crazy thing, all the chores. Did you have a plan when you got out of that 5-year program? Like going in, right? Like a lot of us, like when we go to college, we're like, I'm going to get this degree and go do this thing. Did you have a framework for what, going in, it's like, okay, you're going to learn this knowledge, obviously, but did you have an intent of what you were going to do with it before starting? And did that change throughout the course of it? Is it still the same? Has it changed? But like after going through the program, like what does it look like in real time for you to be doing with the knowledge that you acquired?
So before I joined the program, it was me coming back to martial arts after the 7-year break, I should say. Mm-hmm. And I found myself wanting to train more and get deeper into it. And then I was also teaching kids classes too. And I also taught actually a little bit of Tai Chi, now that I think about it. So teaching was something that I gravitated towards, and I really liked seeing the development in my students. And I remembered my own journey as a high school kid trying it out for the first time. So yeah. My intention for going to the program was so that I could learn material better and become a better teacher once I left. Mm-hmm. So after leaving, or throughout the 5 years I was there, that's why we would come back and teach workshops and just kind of refine our skills. And while we were there, because we had so many visitors come around, we became teachers in that sense as well, because we're always trying to help somebody learn something new, and you have all different people of all different experience levels, and right. That helps you become a better teacher as well. A lot of that was kind of like our own individual journey in terms of becoming teachers. So everybody learns differently, so I would kind of watch somebody who was more experienced and how they taught, and then try to pick up tips that I thought were helpful, because I could see the reaction in the students, whether they understood it better or not. So right. that I felt like, oh, that's a valuable teaching method or technique. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I picked up on how to become a better teacher. So with that in mind, once I left the program, I wanted to become a teacher or continue teaching. And so part of it was going to be, or is going to be, through online teaching. So what Jonathan and I are doing is we've created a lot of videos, and we've used our experiences at the center. Like, we've shot so many videos for Dr. Young, for YMAA Publishing, and John especially got really good at that. So, we invested in our own equipment. We practiced shooting our own videos, so you can see some of them on our YouTube page now. And so part of what we want to do is to shoot tutorials or instructional videos, some of them for free, and then some of them we want to offer for sale as well eventually. And then to go along with that, we also offer online teaching, which we realized throughout the years at the center that there was an interest in that because people wanted to learn specifically what we, and they didn't have a teacher locally.
Right.
So we've been spending more time doing that and seeing more people come to us saying, hey, I'd like to learn what are the different options. And what's great about that is, so we have some videos on the side that they can watch. And then when we have an online live session with them, we can give them feedback on what they're doing, because a video will give you information and it'll teach you basics or help you remember the material, but it can't correct you.
Correct.
So you still need to have a teacher to work with. And ideally you work with them in person, but in some cases you just have to meet with them online. So that's it.
No, that's very cool. And I'm glad you guys are going that direction, because I think the market for one is ripe for it. Like it's prime pickings, and you guys are so skilled. And you're right. There are a lot of people who are looking for some kind of exposure to these arts, but don't have the access. And that's sort of the beauty and the weirdness and the irony of the internet, is that you can get this information and it's like, technically it's not a real live teacher, so live is always the best, I agree. But for the people that don't have access, it seems pretty fitting to do this. And I think it's a really good service because people do benefit from it. And prior to this phone call, or to this interview, you had said to me, you're like, yeah, people, you can learn quite a bit from a video. It's surprising how much you can learn. It's not everything, right? But it's definitely like a sizable piece, right? It's a big piece to the pie in terms of remembering, doing all these things. So I'm really happy to hear that you guys are going that direction, that you've done that. I think it's smart, and it's really like a good service. People definitely need it. One of the things I heard about, and I heard that you weren't able to talk about it at the time, was you got into a movie. You got into Assassin's Creed. Was that right?
Yes.
With Michael Fassbender. That's so crazy. So I heard about that. I don't know, when did that happen? Was that 2015, 16, somewhere in there?
2015.
Okay.
What happened was I have my YouTube channel, and it's really just for my friends, and I post some training videos, and I posted a video of me at the Kung Fu Tai Chi Magazine Tiger Claw tournament in San Jose. And that was in May 2015. I posted it. It probably has like 100 views at most. Yeah. So I don't know how this casting director's assistant found me. She did a search on YouTube, and I don't know how she found me, but she sent me an email saying, I'm a casting director, I've worked on these movies, and we're wondering if you'd be interested in this. And I look at it and I think it's spam. Of course. Like, okay,
yeah.
Let me just like entertain this thought for a moment. So I replied, and then I got a response from her, and I realized it was a legit casting company. So I thought, okay, why not? They didn't tell me the name of the film, but you could find on IMDb based on the information they gave me. So what I had to do was I recorded my sides for an audition tape, and I did a self-tape video, I should say, and sent it in. And a couple weeks later, I heard back saying I got the role. So it all happened very fast. Yeah. So that was in like July of 2015. Then August, I happened to be going to France for one of the YMAA international camps, and so I made a detour to the UK for a costume fitting and to meet the director. And I was to start shooting in October. So I went back to the center for the month of September, but then I had to take a couple months off to fly to London to do the shoot for the film. And I didn't say anything, partially, I mean, I couldn't because of the NDA, but also because like I had no idea, even if I'm in this film, even if I do all these scenes, I might not make the final cut, because you never know what's going to happen.
Totally.
And,
yeah.
I didn't even tell anybody I was in the UK until like later on. I was like, hey guys, I'm here. I can't tell you why, but do you want to meet up? And so, I was there for 3.5 months. And then I went back a couple more times for the reshoots. And then the movie came out in December of 2016. So it was a very odd, very unexpected experience in the middle of my 5 years at the retreat center.
No.
But it was cool.
It's very cool. Yeah, I remember hearing about it because I remember, I think Javi was staying with me. He had come to Sacramento and was visiting me for like a couple days. And he had said to me, he's like, yeah, he's like, Michelle got this role in Assassin's Creed. And she's like one of the people in the movie. I'm like, wait, what? How did that even happen? And then I was, of course, it begged the question, yeah, how did you pull away from the mountain to go do that? So it sounded like it didn't conflict really too terribly much.
At first I was really concerned because I had made the commitment to be there for 5 years, so
Mm-hmm.
I thought about it, and then I asked Dr. Young. I approached him and told him what was going on and asked for his opinion, and he said it was fine. He was supportive of me.
That's
I think
cool.
he can see when there could be other opportunities,
Yeah,
and if you think about it, 3.5 or 3 months in your entire lifetime is really just a drop in the bucket.
it is.
So he said that I could always continue training it, and yeah, so he let me go for that semester, and then that's one of the main reasons why I stayed for an extra semester. So I stayed for 5.5 years, even though I was there for one semester.
Yeah, yeah, you made up the time that you lost that little bit. So just out of curiosity, though, when you were doing the movie, I have not seen it yet, and I've been like, I want to see it really bad, and I know you're in it. So, like, when you go to film this movie, like, what role did you have, and how much are you in the flick? Like, how much of the final cut did you actually make?
I don't know my screen time, but I play one of the other assassins. So Michael Fassbender's character discovers that he's the descendant of an assassin, and there's this entire brotherhood, and there's the assassins and Templars. So he's in Abstergo, which is a lab where the Templars are keeping all these modern day descendants of assassins. So I'm the modern day assassins there. And actually, my character is a descendant of another character who has her own video game in the Assassin's Creed franchise. It's not one of the main games, though. So Assassin's Creed Chronicles China.
Okay.
That's what she's in. So yeah, going into it, I had really had no idea what to expect. So
Yeah.
I thought, okay, I'm just going to go in with what I have, who I am, and give it my best shot and see what happens. And surprisingly, a lot of the martial arts training that I did in my experience on the mountain actually translated into acting and performing for the film, and having a little bit of that exposure with media production because of all the videos that we had shot before.
Sure.
But in terms of preparing for the character, for the action scenes, in our training, we have to have sense of enemy. So we have to make sure what we're doing makes sense if it's actually going against somebody.
Right.
So targets, the spirit, the intention, all of that has to be there. And then when you're doing a fight scene with someone, it's basically the same thing. And you have to try to get as close as you can as possible to the other performers and make it look real. So
Yep.
in some ways it's not real, but in other ways there's some similarity, there's some crossover in terms of the training. And they're very disciplined in their craft, and the people I worked with, they're some of the best in their professions. So
Yeah.
it was amazing to see that level. Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I just haven't, and it's like I forget about it, and I'm like, I gotta see it. I'm definitely gonna watch. I'll probably watch it this weekend as a result of doing this. But did you get to meet Michael Fassbender?
Yeah, I did.
What's he like?
He was really nice. When I first met him, I was going to shake his hand, and he just gave me a hug.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like, because his character is in that lab with me and a couple of other characters as well. So as he's discovering who he is, like the rest of us, we already know who we are, and without giving anything away, we have that connection because we're in the same situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had some scenes with him, and there's a lot of fight scenes going on, and we had to rehearse together and we had to shoot together. So yeah.
That's cool. What a fun little side jaunt while you're on the mountain to go be in a movie. I remember just thinking that, and I thought, good for Michelle. Get out there and get into a Hollywood production for a little while. It's very cool. It sounds like a ton of fun. One of the things you just mentioned that I it kind of sparked an idea, and it's something I talk about with my Tai Chi students in my martial training. It's definitely come up a number of times. And you said, I think it was, sense of enemy was one. You said, the intention and the spirit, and that's something that, I mean, it's very pervasive, obviously, in martial art training. But can you talk about those three things, like why they're important in the context of martial arts, like why that's important?
So without them, what you're doing just becomes movements or I don't want to say dance, but it's missing that feeling. It makes it less martial for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So in our training, when we're doing a sequence, we want to make sure that what we're striking is accurate target wise, or hand form or kicks, that makes sense if you were to use it on a person. So that's part of it. And also being aware of the areas on your own body that are exposed. So when you're neutralizing, that side of it too has to make sense.
Right.
Making sure you're actually blocking your face instead of, it's too low or to the side.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that comes into play when you're talking about awareness of doing your own form, even if it's just solo. And then having the intent, again, they're kind of related to, in the way that say the more young techniques, making sure that they actually come out, because you have to have your mind there in order for you to manifest that, in order for it to actually go through. And then on the yin side as well. So a lot of it is the mind, actually putting your mind into what you're doing.
Yep.
What was the last thing? Oh, spirit.
Yeah.
And that comes with the others as well. So you train to a certain level until you actually can raise your spirit. And I know it's kind of one of those words where you can use it pretty loosely, but when we talk about training, is to have the extra energy and probably even more intention in your movements to make it feel alive, so that if somebody is watching you do a sequence, they feel it too. Yep. And there's a big difference when you watch somebody who is just starting out, or if you just learn new material, you're still thinking about it, versus somebody who has practiced something over and over and over, and you watch them do it, you watch them put their feeling into it, and if you can feel it with them, because that's their expression of it. And then the same goes with like sparring or partner sequences as well. You can tell. So if you watch somebody who's accomplished and how they deal with that partner situation, and if they're able to recenter themselves and find a way to take the advantage, you can tell a lot by watching somebody, if you have the eye for it. So that's what we try to train our students to do, is to develop that eye.
Absolutely. And it's important. And I think that's one of the pieces that, I don't want to say it's lost, but I agree with what you said. It's sort of like it becomes empty movement in a sense. It's not that it's bad for you, but you're going to be missing the layers that are deeper and applicable within the context of that training. There's a bunch of threads you can hit if you're training this stuff, and if those pieces are missing, like you said, it's just sort of, it's a loose choreography with not a lot of structure. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, because years back when I was first getting into martial art training, I don't know, my dad was a Shotokan guy, and I had done judo as a kid, and I was around martial arts, and in the context of fighting arts, I was always interested and into it, but I also had this very idealistic sort of, I don't even know, I think I was just in a weird place where I was trying to be really passive, but I sort of I had this notion that if I was practicing anything that hurt people, that I was somehow corrupting my spirit. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, but that's where I was. And I was like, oh, it's violent, it's not right, and we should be harmonious. And when I started studying martial arts with adults consistently in my adulthood, I just started to see, especially people who were very seasoned and accomplished, sharp martial artists, you guys included, of that group of like people that are just really good. I started to see, I thought, there's something missing here if I'm not touching on that thread. Even if I'm not going to be a fighter, right? Even if I'm not going to go into the UFC or I'm going to go into MMA, there was definitely something missing, like big time. And I really started to see that as I got older, especially in my late 20s. I really started to oh, okay, here it is. And what I've found so far is when I'm teaching Tai Chi students and we're doing a movement and I show them this is a strike, this is a push, this is a a block or a ward off or something, usually people are very much excited to get it because it helps them understand the gesture better. And then they're also like, oh, that's kind of cool too. It gives them that little bump of like, okay, doesn't mean I'm a fighter now or anything, but it gives them a structure of, what they're doing. People, as you're teaching them this and you are exposing them to the martial side of things, is there pushback from people, or are people pretty much just on board to practice, that fighting spirit aspect? Have you had any trouble relaying that to people and getting that idea across to them and the importance of it?
It depends on the type of students or in the class. So for some of them, they seek out Tai Chi to improve their health.
Right.
And we definitely want to support them as well in that journey. So starting with the foundation, the basics, conditioning, and all of that will help the person,
sure,
develop better balance, better rooting, more center. So we want to make sure they have a good base before we introduce anything even remotely martial.
Yep.
So the next step is pushing hands, and I know a lot of people feel very uncomfortable with making contact with another person. So my thinking is to just start with, very easy drills with minimal contact, just to get them used to it. But what I'm finding is that once they get the hang of it and just do very basic, like say single pushing hands drills with another person, and they feel that exchange of energy between them, then they start to think, oh, maybe there's more that I want to get into. Like you said, they don't plan on ever using it.
Yeah.
And you can train a lot of the foundation without ever planning to use it, but still improve your own practice by a lot. Yeah. And I think some of them are starting to understand that it's not just the solo form. I do need to sort of understand how this works by working with another partner, do the application. Like you said, I completely agree. Yeah. When you explain it to someone, then they understand why they have to move a certain way rather than just telling them. So they now have a reason to do it. And it helps their health as well. So they get process. Well,
it takes it out of theory and it actually puts it into real contextual application. They have something to plug into. But it is interesting, and it's nice to hear, because in episode on my podcast, episode 10, I interview, I believe it's 10, Fabian Melendez, he's a boxer who was professional for a little while and now amateur. And then episode 22, I interviewed Tim Cartmel, who's a very well-known Chinese martial artist and trains MMA fighters in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Southern California. And, teachers of mine in the past, what you're saying, what these two guys have said too, is very much that touching on the fighting element and having that integrated into the martial practice, regardless of whether you are going to become a fighter or not, is of the utmost importance for these very reasons. They're like in full agreement with you. They, or with us, they're saying, like Fabian, he trains his boxers regardless if they're going professional. He's like, I train them as fighters, and all of the techniques, the mindset, the movements. So it's fully functional, even if they're not going to use it, because that structure makes sense and makes them healthier. It makes them better practitioners. And Tim Cartmel said something really interesting too. He said, we had this conversation in the episode where I said, Tim, the way I've sort of conceptualized it is that the structure used for martial power that actually gives you, power to push someone well or to strike well, those body alignments are the same ones that are structurally sound for your joints and will give you health. And he's like, that's exactly right. That's why you have to train it. If the structure is fundamentally weak, they're not going to cultivate as much health in their body as they could. So they the common ground between the fighting arts and the healing arts is that the structure, right? The structure of the body is sort of the same. It's just like, how are you using it, right? Like, what are you doing with it? But it's nice to hear, and it's cool to hear that you're finding that with people too, like in your practice as you teach. It sounds like it's part of a big piece of it. Yeah.
Yes.
It's very cool. I love it. Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, Michelle, if in kind of wrapping up, because I know you have a place to be next, and so do I. But in this process, of you going through the program, you've done a lot. You've been in a movie, you've done some cool stuff. Where do you hope that the arts are going? Where are you sort of pushing? I know you're definitely teaching the arts and you're keeping them alive through the YMAA, Dr. Yang Jwing-Ming's lineage. But where are you hoping that like the martial art traditions go from here in modern times when technology is rampant and people are less apt to be in their bodies and more in their minds.
I just hope that more people can discover what it has to offer because there's something in it for everybody, no matter how old you are, what your physical condition is, something can be gained by practicing it. And if if there are so many distractions in this world, I hope that maybe we can start to tap into those people by creating more content that they would want to see, and then they can start to evaluate, okay, I might be on my phone and I'm looking at this video, but this is something else that might actually help me, and then maybe I'll start to practice that a little bit more. So just in a very broad sense, I'd like to just see more people get interested into the arts, and I think that's going to come if everybody in the martial arts community can find other ways to communicate that with those who aren't familiar with it. So whether it's through the healing side or more from the martial side, everybody can connect with somebody else differently. So that's why I like to work with all different kinds of teachers and see what their styles are and see what kind of students they connect with. Because it's really about that connection between a particular student and a teacher, not so much their depth of knowledge, but we hope that with more training, everybody can improve, the teacher and the student. And that's what I'm looking for in myself as well, is to find students who want to learn, and then they can actually help me become a better teacher and become a better student by working with them.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great answer, and I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, I loved being with you guys on the mountain. It felt like such a special time to enter into that program with you guys at that time, because I felt like one of you, even though I wasn't, but I was like, yeah, this is so cool. I get to like be in this weird little bubble just by happenstance to see where you guys were, but to see where you guys have gone and where the program has taken people and what you guys are doing with it, it's inspiring for sure. And I think it's a really cool invitation that you're sort of giving to people in saying this. And I think that fighting piece that we just touched on, I think that's sometimes why people steer clear of the martial arts, is they're kind of freaked out of fighting. They're like, oh, if I study that, I'm going to be violent, and it means that I'm hurting people. And it's just nice to hear that it's like, it doesn't have to be about that, right? It can definitely be a health practice, and it can be a big piece of your life that gives something back to you. And that teacher-student relationship is very reciprocal. I appreciate that you're saying that like your students make you better. And without students, right, there is no teaching. So you sort of need them. It's a big piece of it. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being here, for doing this interview and just taking time out of your schedule. If people want to find you, follow you, learn more about YMAA, about the platform, what are the places? What are your social media handles? Like what's a good place to find you?
So Jonathan, Chang, and we have our website, and it's barkingrabbit.com. I'm born in the year of the dog. He's born in the year of the rabbit. So visit our website, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and
are you guys all under that name?
Yeah. So you can find that handle for each of those different platforms, and it's all on our website as well. And if they want to send us an email, it's woof, WOOF, at barkingrabbit.com. But in terms of the YMAA schools, you can also go to YMAAschools.com, and that'll give you the training contents that we go through in our curriculum, as well as the YMAA schools around the world if they are interested in seeking one of the directors there. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's awesome. And just one last quick question about that, the YMAA program. Is the mountain programs, are they still going on currently right now? Were there new programs that were started?
There was a new program that started, but as far as I know, the center will be open until at least 2020, but they are preparing to sell it because it's going to end pretty soon. So it's going to take some time to find a buyer. Yeah,
fair enough. And just for people listening, because I think that was the coolest part about the mountain, was that people like me strangers who have no affiliation with the association could go and live and visit and train and be a part of this. Is that door still open for people if they want to go and visit, or is it just closed right now and just for students training?
No, it's still open. So there's still a couple of students there. So if they want to visit the retreat center, then they can go on YMAAretreatcenter.com, and then they can send an email and see when's a good time to visit, and all the details will be there.
Okay. Well, very cool. Well, thank you again, Michelle. I really appreciate your time, and thanks for all the work that you're doing in this field and just with the martial arts world.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, take care.
All right, bye.